Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack one of the absolute most enduring mysteries in modern American history, the 1947 Roswell incident. Now, we aren't here to push any single agenda today. Instead, we're taking a strictly dialectical approach. We're going to objectively map out the competing theories, outline the official government explanations, and then contrast those directly with the critiques from dedicated researchers. So let's break down the timeline, the physical evidence, and the wildly varying interpretations of what actually happened in the desert that summer. So what really crashed out there? Over 7 decades later, this single event still completely defines the cultural identity of the area. If you visit Roswell today, you aren't just visiting a town, you are stepping into the global epicenter of UFO mania. There's a massive museum, you can grab a burger at a flying saucer-inspired McDonald's, walk under streetlights shaped like alien heads, and literally drive past a display of an extraterrestrial family stranded on the side of State Route 285 looking for a jumpstart. It's fun. But behind all of this folklore lies a seriously complex history of admitted government cover-ups and fiercely conflicting explanations. Was it a saucer? Was it a highly classified spy craft? Or maybe, was it a Soviet plot? Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with 1, the Roswell discovery, move on to 2, the government's changing story, unpack 3, Project Mogul and paratroopers, shift over to 4, researchers critique the claims, and finish up with 5, the Soviet panic theory. Starting right off with Section 1, the Roswell discovery and that shocking press release. To really grasp this, we have to mentally travel back to the summer of 1947. This was the dawn of the Cold War, right? National anxiety was incredibly high. Sometime between mid-June and early July, a rancher named Mac Brazel finds wreckage scattered all over his massive property, about 75 miles north of Roswell. Now, pay attention to the absolute whiplash of the timeline here. The very next day after the debris is reported, the Roswell Army Airfield, the RAAF, releases this total shocker of a statement. They publicly announce to the entire world that they've recovered a flying disc. But literally the following day, the Army totally reverses course. They retract the flying disc claim and tell everyone, never mind, it was just a standard weather balloon. So what did Mac actually find out there in the desert dirt? The physical wreckage was basically rubber strips, tinfoil, and some thick paper. You might be wondering, well, why on earth did he immediately jump to extraterrestrials? Because national newspapers were actually already circulating stories about flying discs that summer. Brazel was primed by the news. He gathers it up, takes it to the sheriff, who calls the military. Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer, is sent out to investigate. Major Marcel even ends up posing for photographs with pieces of this supposed weather balloon debris to sell the government's newly changed story. Which brings us to Section 2, the government's changing story, decades later. For almost 50 years, UFO researchers call bluff on that weather balloon explanation. And, as it turns out, they were absolutely right to be suspicious. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force releases a massive report officially conceding that, the weather balloon story was completely bogus. Instead, they introduced Project Mogul. This was a highly classified operation using a string of high-altitude balloons equipped with specialized microphones. The goal? To float stealthily over the USSR and detect sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. Because it was such a deeply covert spy op at the height of Cold War tension, the government claims they had to use a false cover story, the weather balloon, to protect their secret tech. So that officially set up the modern narrative. Section 3, Project Mogul and paratroopers, the final stance. So the military finalizes their explanations for basically every lingering anomaly. The 94 report says the wreckage was a Project Mogul spy device, and the flying saucer rumor was a highly useful cover story for national security. But what about the eyewitnesses who swore they saw actual alien bodies at the crash site? Well, a follow-up report in 1997 stated that those supposed bodies were actually fallen parachute test dummies from high-altitude drops. Smithsonian historian Roger Launius looks at these reports and essentially says, case closed. For him, while every tiny detail might not be perfectly mapped out, there are no significant holes left in the official story. But the UFO research community isn't buying it. Section 4, researchers critique the claims, focusing on logical inconsistencies. Let's compare the two arguments directly. The government argues that putting out a story about a flying saucer and then a weather balloon was a super useful cover for a secret spy program. But investigators like Donald Schmitt, who co-founded the UFO Museum, point out a massive flaw in that logic. Think about it for a second. Claiming you found a flying saucer is literally the most explosive, attention-grabbing thing you could possibly say. Instead of quietly hiding a spy program, you are practically begging the entire world to point their cameras directly at a region filled with highly sensitive military operations. Schmidt anchors this critique in the actual geography of the area. He points out 2 hours west of Roswell, the first atomic bomb was detonated. If anything, they needed less attention. Just picture the map of New Mexico in 1947. You've got top-secret atomic research at Los Alamos. You've got the military testing captured German V-2 rockets over at White Sands. And right there in Roswell, you have the headquarters of the very first atomic bomb squadron. To the researchers, the idea that the War Department would intentionally trigger a worldwide media frenzy right in the middle of America's nuclear hub just seems highly, highly illogical. Now let's look at one more wildly different perspective. Section 5, the Soviet Panic Theory, an unconventional claim. Often called the Area 51 theory, this was put forward by journalist Annie Jacobson based on an unnamed defense contractor source, and it takes a really dark turn. The theory claims Soviet leader Joseph Stalin hatched a horrific plan, using infamous Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele to surgically deform children to look like aliens. The idea was to fly them over New Mexico, purposefully crash, and trigger a massive War of the Worlds style panic that would completely overwhelm America's early warning radar systems. So how do these wildly different theories handle the actual eyewitness accounts? Take 11-year-old Jesse Marcel Jr., the son of the intelligence officer. His dad brought some debris home. Marcel Jr. swore he handled metallic material covered in strange geometric symbols, like Egyptian hieroglyphs. UFO researchers say, boom, proof of an alien language. But the Soviet theory offers a surprisingly grounded alternative. What if an 11-year-old kid from New Mexico in 1947 was simply looking at pieces of a Soviet aircraft, seeing the Russian Cyrillic alphabet for the very first time, and just misinterpreting those letters as alien geometry? But we need to ground ourselves back in historical reality here. As historian Roger Launius clearly states, there's no evidence in any Soviet archives, and if the intent was to generate panic, it failed utterly miserably. What's actually fascinating is that on this specific point, both the Smithsonian historian and the hardcore UFO researchers completely agree. The historical record just doesn't support a massive Soviet panic op, especially one that, frankly, didn't cause any radar-overwhelming panic at all. So what's the real takeaway here? Is the case truly closed? Or will layers of cover-ups forever obscure the truth? We've mapped out the facts of the 47 discovery, the shifting timeline of the government's Project Mogul explanations, the sharp geographical critiques from researchers, and even the bizarre fringes of Cold War paranoia. Whether you think the military's 94 and 97 reports perfectly close the book, or you think the weird logic of the cover-up points to something deeper, Roswell is just an unbelievable testament to how a vacuum of reliable information can ignite our imaginations. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.